Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Peace Podcast. This is Just Heal Me from Comparison, whatever that looks like. And so we have probably heard the phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. And that phrase is so accurate because to experience joy, like true joy, to be able to walk throughout your life knowing that you are rooted in what's happening around you, you're rooted in what's happening within you, and that you are in alignment with what was designed to be your life, helps you to experience more joy. But when you start to compare what you have to what other people have, to compare your experience to what other people are experiencing, and even comparing what you've had to endure to what other people haven't had to endure, a lot of times that causes you to sit in a space of depression and a space of anxiety. Depression because you're looking back at your past and saying, okay, well, something must be wrong with me. Something must be wrong with who I have become as a result of the things that have happened in my past. And it gives you an overwhelming feeling of sadness for the things that you can't change. And anxiety because when you start to position yourself against what other people have and are doing, then you start to ask the questions of what if? What if I never get there? What if I never see my purpose? What if I never actually enact the plan that has been created for my life? And that causes extreme anxiety because of fear of the unknown. A future is an unknown space. So to have fear about the future can create that feeling in the pit of your stomach of anxiety. And we have gotten that message from somewhere. And you know that I always go back to your childhood messaging and downloads because most of the things that we know to be true today resulted in the messaging that we were given as a child. This is not to say that we are villainizing the people who tended to you. We're not saying that they are at fault for every experience that you have right now, but it's taking a look at what you've been through and really analyzing those situations to determine why you are the way you are, why you behave the way you behave, and why you think the way you think. And if you don't go back to those childhood messages, then sometimes you'll be really clueless about why you even think that in the first place. And oftentimes we just assume that everybody has that same messaging. Now, some things are inherently true. Like, for instance, if you grew up in the 90s and you have body image issues, there are a lot of people who grew up in that era that do because of the messaging we were given externally. It also has a lot to do with the generation that the people that we called caretakers grew up in. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but they were still working with the best that they had with what they knew at the time. This is an effort for us to not look at them to place blame, but to look at that experience to uncover and unearth some truths about us. So when you think about your childhood, if you were compared to others based on performance, for instance, if somebody told you that your grades weren't good enough because people that they knew had children who were making better grades, or if someone was looking at the way that you performed in a sport. Well, first of all, we're ranked in sports in general, but also if they're looking at you on the court or on the field with other people and they're saying, well, you didn't perform as well as so-and-so, even if you did your best, they're still making comparisons. That creates a feeling of value and worth in your comparison to other people. You know, I was in a classroom the other day and the teacher asked a question using a protocol called Sometimes, Always, Never. And the question centered around something that was, if you do your best and you try hard enough, you'll reach your goal. And the kids had to answer always, sometimes, never. And one of the students, it was a third grader, said, well, sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's true because you could work really hard and you could climb up the ladder in comparison to other people. It's like sometimes you could do your very best and there's always going to be somebody who's better than you. And that is why childhood messaging that's rooted in comparison is unhealthy for a child and also an adult if it is rooted in worthiness. So if your parents or caregivers positioned that as a way to motivate you, they might have done it with different wording. Like, well, yeah, so-and-so got more goals than you, but let's look at what they did differently and try to work on that for yourself. Or, no, you didn't perform your best in this race, but what are some things that we can work on to make sure that you do, because you want to beat these times because they were the people who won the race. That is healthy comparison. When it's unhealthy, it's saying they're better than you infinitely because they beat you in this race. They're better than you because they have better grades than you. They're better than you because they have better behavior than you. And that part of comparison is the part that when downloaded into you makes you feel that the only way that you have worth is if you outperform other people. And so you're constantly taking a look at the competition, even if they don't consider themselves competition, because you want to determine if you're doing better enough than them to be able to deem yourself worthy. And that's just not healthy. The other thing that happens is the comparison with siblings. So a lot of times when you have a sibling, and this happened to me, my sister was very much a rule follower, and I was probably a little bit of a problem child in that area because I questioned everything. From the time that I can remember, I was super inquisitive and wanted to know why things happened the way they happened, why the rules were the rules, and why that was something that we had to follow, and why couldn't we, think about a different way. Just because that was the way we'd always done it doesn't mean that it's the way that it always needed to be done. And so quite often, the messaging was, why can't you be more like your sister? Why can't you just be easy like your sister? Why can't you just follow the rules like your sister? And as a child, it diminished that inquisitive nature in me a little. It was still there because it was just innately in me, but I wondered why myself, I couldn't just be more like my sister. It also created a rupture in my relationship with my sister, because when you're constantly being placed in comparison with a person, you obviously are going to have some ill feelings toward that person because they have become the mark of success that your caretakers have shown you. And that person has flaws and that person has things that they're being given grace for, but you aren't. And so that is detrimental to the relationship with siblings, but also creates a constant feeling in the inside of that child that says, I have to position this in a way that says, what would my sibling do? Because I want to be more like my sibling, instead of being crafted to be the way that you were, because my inquisitive nature has actually helped me astronomically when it comes to relationship, when it comes to work life, when it comes to just creating these podcasts in general, because I have a craving for understanding the why behind people's behaviors. And also, something that happens when you are constantly compared to other people is that it compromises your mental health. Like, there is no way for you to be in a mentally healthy space where you're striving to just do your best, where you're striving to work harder at what your best may be, when you're being told that your best needs to be this person's. And it also diminishes your ability to nurture the parts of you that will be able to find a different path, because if you're constantly trying to be the best, whatever the person you're comparing yourself to is, then you'll never be your best at the thing that you're supposed to be doing. So my sister is really good at creating spreadsheets, and we are both very structured people, but she's really good at creating spreadsheets and organizing things, and she just has a knack for that. Now, when we went on vacation one time, she had this spreadsheet that had like the day, the time we woke up, the time we were going to eat, the time we were going to go to the beach, the time we were going to go investigate and explore the world around us. It was all in the spreadsheet. And I remember when I showed it to my oldest, who at the time was probably like 20, he was like, we're not doing all of this, are we? Because in him, it created a feeling of anxiety because he's used to the mom who says, okay, while we're here, these are the 5 things we're going to do, and these are the days we're going to do them on, but we're easy breezy. We're going to move in and out of them because when we're on vacation, we have an itinerary, but it's not structured to the hour. Now, my sister, on the other hand, is really good at making sure that her family sees and does everything that they want to see and do. And so that itinerary works for them. They actually feel supported by it. And if I, on our next family vacation, strived to be more like my sister, my kids would be anxious about that because it's not what they're used to, and they have become accustomed to, and they crave an environment where when we go on vacation, we know that we're going to do some activities. We know that everybody's going to get to pick a restaurant at least one of the nights that we're there. And we know that we're probably going to cook in one of the nights. Like, it's just what we do. And so when we go on vacation, they don't need to know exactly what we're doing, but they like knowing that everybody's going to get to do the things that they usually do. And if I try to become more like her, then my kids would miss out on who I was crafted to be. And that might seem like something small, but when you're going into the world and you're thinking about what you're comparing yourself, what aspects you're comparing to other people, you have to think that that's what you're doing too. Because if I'm trying to be more like her best instead of cultivating my best, then I'm going to become another version of this person, but I'm not going to have the flexibility to become who I was crafted to be because I'm going to be too busy trying to become who that person was crafted to be. And perhaps what they're doing and what they're excelling at was never really what they were crafted to be or do in the first place. It's just the pathway they fell into because they just happen to be innately good at that thing, but it's not really where they wanted to put their gifting. And also, the enemy can be talking to this person that you are trying to emulate, and now you're emulating a path that isn't even aligned with the one who created you because you're too busy comparing. The other thing that comparison does, and I talked about the anxiety and depression that it can cause, but it also can cause inactivity and procrastination. Because when you are comparing yourself to other people, there's a fear inside of you that you won't do it as well as they're doing it. And sometimes that can cause you to not do anything in the first place. But when there's something in you that is yours, it literally becomes easy to you. It's like you can't even understand why it's not easy to another person because it's so easy to you. You know, my friends and family joke all the time because they know that if I don't know something, I'm going to Google it. And not only am I going to Google it, but I'm going to like dive into a research station to like get deep dive into the information that surrounds this topic. And it doesn't make sense to me that other people aren't like that, because if I don't know something, I want to know the thing. And so I'm going to delve deep into it. But some people are just fine with not knowing. They don't have an inquisitive brain that tells them that they want to dive into that research. And so it's not difficult for me to do that. It's not difficult for me. It doesn't feel arduous to go down a whole research rabbit hole because I crave that information, where for someone else, it might seem like, you know, you're asking them to open an encyclopedia and go to the library, and that's not something that they do. So the things that are gifted in me, the things that I'm good at are easy for me, but they may be difficult for other people. And that's true of the things that you may be comparing yourself to another person in that area, that it just comes easy to them and they're gifted to do it. And because of that, you know that it's not in you to do it. So it creates this procrastination and inactivity because you're afraid to even start the thing. One, because it doesn't come naturally to you. You don't have a true passion inside of you for it. And two, because you're afraid that if you do it, you're not going to be as good as that other person is at it. And so you don't want to start it in the first place. Inside of the comparison, much like I was talking about with my sibling, it creates strained relationships, because if you're looking at your friend's marriage and you want a partner like his or her partner, and you're comparing your partner to their partner, and you're wanting your partner to be like that person's partner, when that happens, if that is verbalized, it's going to strain relationships, because your friend is going to feel like maybe you have an unhealthy adoration for their partner, but also it's going to make it weird for that person, because they're going to be like, well, I don't want to say I'm doing too much, because if I do, then it's going to make this other person look bad. Additionally, if you are pitted against somebody, it becomes really hard to develop a strong relationship with that person, because you aren't authentically sitting with them. You're taking notes on what they're doing or not doing so that you can compare your own actions to theirs to be better at them than something. And honestly, I don't think any of us, I know for certain me, but anyone who's listening, wants someone around them as a friend, and I put that in air quotes, who's constantly assessing their behaviors to try to be more than them. Because what inadvertently will happen is that person will start to compare, and then they'll start trying to compare down, which means that they'll start to try to find ways that they're better than that other person at something, and they'll be criticizing and judgmental of that person, so that even though that person is better than them at the thing that they're chasing, they're going to make them feel less than them in other areas, so that it puts them on the same playing field. Because, like I said before, it really compromises your mental health when you're comparing yourself to other people, because you can't just enjoy that person. You're now trying to find ways to build your ego and tear theirs down so that you can feel like you guys are at the same level. And how much better would that relationship be if you just were able to value and admire them for the things that they were good at, and just become more of the things that you are good at? Because eventually, when you compare yourself to all of the people around you, when you're comparing yourself to the people that you're scrolling through on socials, when you're comparing yourself to your friends, to your family, to your coworkers, you will not be able to have a healthy sense of self-worth, because your worth will be directly tied to how much better you are than those other people. And if you're not truly in alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, you're not going to feel good about any of the things that you're doing, because your worth doesn't lie there. Your worth lies in how closely you are aligned with what God put you here to do. You are valuable regardless, but when you feel the most passion and the most worthiness, it comes from saying, I'm doing exactly what I was designed to do. I'm living out my giftings, and I'm doing the best version of that I can possibly do. You know, if you look at this channel, like there are a lot of times where I could look at the views, or I could look at the shares, and I could be like, you know, I'm doing better at this game than this person, and this person. Why are they getting more views than me? And that has before been an issue where it made me want to stop recording, because no matter what I put out, not as many people were listening as other people. And I started to develop this little self-righteous type of feeling where it was like, well, I'm going to be better than everybody at this, and maybe that will create more of a listenership, not because I want to be more popular, but because I believe that the words that I'm speaking are things that have been given to me by God to be able to put it out in the world, so that people aren't experiencing the same grief and dysfunction that I was experiencing in the past. But I started developing those feelings that felt really negative inside my body. And I had to sit with it for a minute and just say, if only 8 people listened, it was 8 people who needed to hear what you had to say. If 228 people listened, it was 228 people who needed to hear what you have to say. And there are going to be people who need to be connected to you for the gifting that you have, not the gifting that other people have. So when you think about wanting to experience joy, The most joy that we usually experience is by doing stuff for other people, not for other people to deem us worthy, but to give somebody something, to do something not for the accolades, but just so that someone else can experience a better existence or a better life. You can't do that by comparing, because when you are doing the whole social comparison thing, you are decreasing your own satisfaction with your own life. So there's no way that you're going to be able to lend a hand to somebody else to increase their satisfaction with their life without having some strings attached to it, without doing it for the accolades or doing it to boost your own ego. The thing that we need to remember is that self-compassion is so important in a world where comparison tends to be the thing that everyone's doing. So when you're scrolling and you see that, her lip filler looks gorgeous and her plastic surgery looks gorgeous and she has the perfect relationship and she has the perfect parenting style, etc., what we need to start understanding is it's not about us being the perfect measure of what society deems to be good, but it's about us being able to be the best version of ourselves that we were created to be. And that's really hard when you're giving yourself access to all of these things to compare yourself to. But when you take inventory of yourself and you say, what are some things that I want to be better at without any of the messaging that anyone else has given me? That's where the self-compassion comes in. And it builds the opportunity to be calm in your situation. It builds the opportunity to be regulated, to feel less stress. And it also allows you to not feel like you need to live a life of perfectionism, but that you're just being more resilient. You're saying, I'm comparing me to me yesterday, and this is what I want to be better at, so I'm going to be better at that thing, which cultivates a cycle of resilience. When we're thinking about our nervous system in this space, comparison is going to build some of those survival-based identity patterns that I've talked about in previous episodes. You're going to tell yourself that you're not enough. You're going to tell yourself that you're not as good as these other people. You're going to tell yourself that you're stupid, that you're ugly, that you're whatever, insert thing that you're insecure about here. And the joy of having self-compassion and the joy of being able to get rid of that self-comparison is being able to regulate yourself. So that instead of saying I'm not enough, you just tell yourself I'm becoming more of this thing that I'm focusing on. And when we practice that sort of compassion toward ourselves, we are actually rewiring our neural pathways to be able to find comfort in that space so that we can stay regulated. Because our emotional regulation has been created by our past situations. So hypervigilance was created in our past, and now we feel like that's safety. But when we consistently tell ourselves, it's only you, you're getting better than you were yesterday, this is the thing you're working on, you're becoming more of this thing, it allows your neurons in your brain and the pathways in your brain to say, oh, that's what we're doing. We're no longer comparing ourselves to all these other people. Because what's true, and what I know to be true in personal experience and people that I am consistently around, is that comparison makes you feel small. It reiterates that messaging that you're not enough. But self-compassion reminds you of your inherent worth and your uniqueness and your ability to become a better version of you every single day. So today I encourage you, this week I encourage you, each time you notice yourself comparing yourself to something or someone else, pause, take a breath, and speak a statement of self-compassion over yourself. If you say, I'm not pretty enough, because you see somebody on the reels who you feel is prettier than you or meets the societal standards of beauty, tell yourself, I am enough just as I am. I am crafted to be exactly like I am. If God wanted me to look differently, He would have done so. And journal, write those things down. Write down the time where you wanted to say, you're not good enough, you'll never be, and all of the old messaging and narratives in your brain. and write down what you said to yourself instead in self-compassion. Keep a record of this, because the more you say the statements of self-compassion, the more your brain will navigate toward that, because it believes it to be safe. Thank you guys for tuning in. Don't forget to tune in for the how-to video next week, where we're talking about how we're able to take ourselves from comparison to that self-compassion and thrive in that space. That'll be coming out on Thursday on my YouTube channel. And remember to share this video with someone that you think it will resonate with. Go to my socials, like and subscribe to those pages, follow me there. Because remember that knowledge gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but knowledge shared with the world could just be the catalyst for change that someone needs to break free from the bondage that they're in and to surrender whatever it is that they're struggling with to the one who created them. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.